Okay, I'm still here with Dr. Roy Jackson from the University of Gloucestershire, and we've been talking about evil and theodicy and attempts to resolve that. And somebody asks, which of the current theodicies, which are the contemporary attempts to solve or explain evil in the context of a divine being, will you think remain prominent in philosophy as time goes on in the future?
Right, okay. Well, I think this is a theodicy. I mean, I argue that the free will defence, I think, is the best here, I think, in this case. I think it's a theodicy because it still maintains God attributes here. It still does accept that evil does exist. In addition, it argues that human beings are given free will, and therefore the possession of free will leads to a greater good that outweighs all the evil in the world. So, in that sense, I think it's probably the strongest argument, and strongest because, as we were previously saying, I think philosophically the whole topic of free will continues to preoccupy philosophers. I think it's a very prominent issue. There are, of course, arguments that state that free will does limit God's power, and that's another issue. But there are also arguments against that.
I mean, you might argue that by concentrating on free will, you're really concentrating, and there might be good reasons to do so, on moral evil. What the free will defence, as far as I understand it, doesn't really tackle is natural evil. I mean, we're recording this on a day after a big tornado in the States, and people are, as they often are, at these kind of circumstances, thinking, how can this be allowed? How can a God unleash natural forces that cause this kind of human suffering?
Yes.
I'm not sure free will doesn't address that kind of evil.
No, I'm not sure if any theodicy does particularly do that in a very, very good way, apart from maybe the argument for soul making in some ways.
Yeah, the whole Irenaeus thing seems to try and do it, but I get the impression from your reaction that you're not entirely impressed by it.
Well, I suppose that the main criticism against it, sometimes it seems rather extreme in terms of what happens in terms of evil, and the fact that there's standard arguments against it in terms of why is it that innocent people, seemingly innocent people, are affected by these
It does seem the kind of soul-making idea of explaining natural evil does seem a rather peculiar version of divinity.
Yes.
To say that God requires our souls to be forged in this very trying and testing thing, which also seems to have lots of waste, and if God couldn't have created us without that, then that's a limit on omnipotence and isn't really theodicy.
That's right. Unless you go to someone like Richard Swinburne, who would argue that in fact we don't really know what God's plan is anyway, and we can only see it within human terms, which is fairly limited in terms of time and space.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that takes us out of philosophical theodicy and more towards perhaps a faith-driven response rather than a reason-driven response, perhaps.
Yes, no, I'd agree with that.
Okay, we're better to stop while we still agree.
Yes.